Now, there's a recent ruling by the National Labor Relations Board that will now allow college NCAA players to be treated as employees and allowed to bargain for wages as part of a union. So college athletes, student athletes, will now be able to unionize. Now, college sports are a billion-dollar industry, of course, with the bowl games and tournaments raking in about $18 billion alone annually, none of which goes to the student athletes. A lot of it goes to coaching and to the school itself. This lawsuit by the student athletes saying that it's saying that they put so much time into their sports that they should get something out of it other than, the scholarship and room and board. It's something, of course, that the NCAA is 100% against. Kane Coulter actually began this push to unionize. He was the originator. He was backed by the Steelworkers Union because of the long hours he put into the game, the health risks such as concussions, and his own disenfranchisement. He told ESPN that, quote, "If we're making sacrifices like we are, we should have these basic protections taken care of. With the sacrifices we make athletically, medically, and with our bodies, we need to be taken care of." Now, these players, on top of their studies, regularly put in about 50 to 60 hours into football with football players, and I assume putting a lot of time into basketball as well. And according to the ruling, that qualifies them to be treated as employees of the university. It's not like the NCAA is hurting for money. They have a $10 billion contract for TV rights to the basketball tournaments, and a new recent deal, a $7 billion deal, TV deal for the football bowl games. So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I actually disagree with this ruling, and I think the NCAA is a criminal organization, and I disagree with this ruling. The problem with this ruling is that if you treat NCAA, there's actually like 5 problems, but one of them is if you treat college athletes like employees, then their scholarships then become taxable income. So if you're like, if you're a Duke basketball player and you're paying $60,000 and you get a $60,000 scholarship, you're gonna have to pay taxes on that as if it was $60,000 in income, which is ridiculous. And another problem with paying college athletes is Title IX. And Title IX of the Civil Rights Act, or I don't know if it's the Civil Rights Act, it might be some other women's act, says that you have to treat colleges have to treat men and women equally based on circumstances. So what it basically says is if you pay a male student athlete a certain amount of money, then you have to pay a female student athlete that same amount of money, which makes no sense because we all know that men as athletes are more valuable than women in most cases in most sports. So you run into 2 problems there. The thing that I hope that they end up reaching is an agreement that basically college athletes aren't employees, but they own their own name. So they can do autograph things, they can use their own image and profit off of that, and they don't need to necessarily get paid directly from the school, so they can still maintain their scholarships and all that, but they can go market themselves and make money off their own name. Like, because right now the NCAA will fine you if you sign a jersey for like $20 for a kid or anything like that. I think that's ridiculous. So I think you need a more middle ground approach in this particular issue.
I don't know. I mean, growing up in a right-to-work state, I'm not, quite as like gung-ho pro-union as a lot of liberals are. But my issue here is not so much like, quite frankly, I do normally like unions, but my issue here is like, even though this seems like a good liberal step, letting people unionize, like anything that makes students into employees or makes education more of a commodity and less of a public service, I'm against.
It's the sports part of it though.
Yeah, but these are people these are students. These are not athletes first and foremost, or that's what the NCAA maintains. And so like anything like that makes that obvious lie more legitimate, again, kind of to harp on a previous point, I'm against. Like students need to be students. They're not employees. If you play school sports, that's great. I love my Razorbacks. But education should be about education above all else. Students are not employees before they're students.
where I tend to agree with Jordan, I also completely disagree, simply because it's kind of like, that's sort of like a Frank Capra speech at this point with university sports. It's just like, I'm with you in principle, but in the reality of how things have gone, you're never getting it back to education. To talk to Sean's point, a couple of things here. One, I'm 100% for this, because anytime you have this sort of exploitation on this level, you just need something like a union to come in. There's very few options to really create equality. The problem with your in my opinion, the problem with a couple of the examples you used of naming rights is the linebacker who's getting run into the ground, who also kind of gets his life ruined, probably doesn't have a nice little autograph session coming to him. So you create an inequality amongst the star athletes versus just the regular Rudy types that are going to end up with no knees when they're 35. So, I mean, that's one of the issues. The other thing, it's just $1 billion industry at this point. Like, it's no, you're never going to get it back to, gee, for the good of the game and for the good of school. These kids, a lot of them aren't getting their diplomas, or if they are, they're not coming out with a whole lot of options. Some of them are, and that's amazing, but we know they're there for sports. We know they're there to win championships or to, like, get the school money. This school's been making money off the backs of these guys and women for years, so they'll figure out the small little details. And the taxability thing, I'm not completely in agreement with you that that's true about scholarships, but the thoughts of that is they'll figure those details out in a hurry to make the system fair, but the union's needed.
Yeah, for me, I agree with a number of Sean's points. They should be allowed to unionize. It certainly shouldn't affect their scholarships if they are kind of getting paid and considered as employees. But to me, the very idea that you go to university or college, as you refer to it, and kind of you're asking to get paid. I mean, I don't know whether the students are actually asking to get paid. They may just be asking that they're treated with a bit of respect. They have this collective bargaining power. But the very idea that you go to university to get paid to play sport is just weird to learn, not to play sport. And the whole sports, kind of college sports system that you have in America is just far-fetched to me. But, I think Sean made some really good points in that. You do have to have some power, but the way kind of it seems to be going at the moment, it certainly needs a number of tweaks before it's actually a benefit to the players at the universities.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with your point that the whole way that we have this set up, where, I mean, this is an industry now, and it shouldn't be an industry, and I completely agree with Sean on that one. It should be, school should be about school, as Jordan said, and I definitely agree with everybody in principle. But once again, Dan made a great point. It's exploitation.
Yeah, but
they need a protection against this exploitation. It's not just for the good of the game, because, I mean, the game is rather dangerous. And you've got this coach that's making $3.7 million, and these college kids, they're getting their room and board and everything like that, and a scholarship, and that's great. But the main problem, and one of the reasons why one of the players, student athletes, filed the suit is because it's like, hey, I don't have time to finish medical school because I've got 50 to 60 hours of football a week to do. Right. So I can't do anything else.
The point I wanted to make about Dan's point is that because he said athletes will be treated unequally. Like, first and foremost, everybody should get their health care. If you're injured on the field for a university, they should have to take care of you. That's a no-brainer to me. But secondly, the reason I said that you should make money off of your name, it's because people are unequal on the football field and they will have an unequal advantage. Like, your linebacker would be hurt more, your average college linebacker would be hurt more by being turned into an employee and having his scholarship be turned into taxable income, because you can't use his name to go out and make up the difference.
I don't think you're right on that. Like, I don't think that exactly goes into taxable income. There are many employees. You take a job, for example, if you go to school and you become a res, like, I don't know what you guys call it, but, like, take after residences. There's unions for that here. You're still going to school, but you also have a job. So it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to owe $60,000 on a scholarship.
But you don't work for the school. They're saying that they're working as athletes for the school, and that they're going to
Yeah, you
Their
do work for the
scholarships-
school in those situations. There's lots of unionized jobs at schools.
Is going to turn into taxable income, but
That's
not even it.
for against union.
But that's not even the other problem. The other
Okay.
problem is because of Title IX, you can't pay a male college athlete more. You can't treat male college athletes different from female college athletes. So it's not going to make a lot of sense that your Heisman award-winning star quarterback makes the same amount as your swim team third
Why not? You're in
string
collegiate
girl.
sports. You're in collegiate sports, so why don't we bring that back down to reality? Maybe that's the great thing about this. Like Jordan came back around in circles from the first time. I'll come back the same way. Let's go back to square one and go, yeah, you know what? Guess what? The girl on the lacrosse team makes as much as the Heisman Trophy winner. Good luck to you, universities.
Excellent. That would be fantastic. Now, also, Dan, I do want to point out, if you were a decent human being, aka an American, you would know that linebackers don't get run into the ground; they run people into the ground.
Well, their knees at the bottom line. Whereas my point is that like they're screwed when they're a 40-year-old man. Is really where I was going, and no one knows their name.
Well, that's your linemen especially. I don't know the data on linebackers.
Well, my thing is that because of certain laws, there are certain barriers in the way that we have to treat athletes, and one of those is Title IX. So if they're employees, then all athletes are employees, and even though football and basketball, especially male football and basketball, in most schools are the biggest sports, and they're the ones with the video game revenue and all this stuff, like that has to be shared equally among other sports, or like because you can't treat, because of Title IX, men and women differently in college athletics. If you could, and you could pay people based on like what they're worth and what they produce for the school, I'd probably be in favor of this. But as a practical solution, I think the only logical thing you could do is let people make money off of their names.
Yeah, but surely, I mean, I don't know exactly what Title IX specifically states, but if like surely you're comparing like with like. If a male is doing a secretarial job and a woman is doing a secretarial job in the same capacity, then they have to be paid the same. I can understand.
It's about universities.
I know, but if a male, I can understand that a male basketball player should be paid exactly the same as a female basketball player, but I don't see why a university should have to pay a male basketball player the same as a female swimming kind of team captain, because they're not comparable. They're different sports. I can understand them having to pay the same across the same sport, but across different sports.
But also,
that shouldn't be the case.
And the other thing is too, Sean, is you have to understand they're talking about a ton of different things besides money. So we're zeroing in on the salary idea to try to knock it down as a bad idea, but also all of these athletes at every level deserve the same kind of protections against the exploitation of this billion-dollar industry that is the NCAA. So this is what the union's for. I'm sure they will try to like muck it up as much as possible with like, now we're gonna have to pay the ringette like coach $1 million, which is obviously not true, and they'll figure it out. Like
the coaches are different, but. Yeah, I get what you're saying. They're trying to muck it up, and I think that they should get the health care. Every athlete should get the health care if they're injured.
Right.
But I think for like video game revenue, that to me that comes with players owning their name, because the video game revenue is like the biggest like spit in the face to the players, is because you're using their image, their stats. I mean, technically they don't have names on the jerseys.
You know who's
Exactly.
really
So
good
they're
at
not profiting off your name. They're profiting off your talent.
Right.
Like.
But also,
it's the same. You know what they're doing.
you know who's really good at winning those kind of battles? Unions.
But I'm just saying, technically, like the court ruled that they're employees, which I don't agree with. If they could be somehow a non-unionized employee group, then that would make sense. A unionized non-employee group. Like if they could negotiate as a collective but not be technically considered as an employee, then that would be a better medium for me.
Yeah, like the bottom line for me is that I completely agree with Jordan and the idea of the in heart and in aspirations and in lovely Frank Capra fashion. The problem is it hasn't been that way for so long. It's never going back to university education. These people are complete paid athletes without the benefit of being paid. And so, I mean, yeah, I'm kind of with, Steve and I could kind of like basically sum up tonight's show with only in America. A lot of these topics, it's really hard to fathom outside of your country that university college players would ever get the amount of money. We don't even sell out stadiums here for our university athletics. Like it's like your friends and family show up. You guys build like high school stadiums. So
college football is like the #2 sport behind NFL football in like half the states in this country.
Well, it's so big. We bet on it here. Like we bet like it's on television in Canada. Like your Final Four March Madness, which always blows me away because I'm like I can't care about my own country's university athletics, let alone somebody else's country. But it's a huge television draw here too. So that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Well, that outside perspective is I think it's needed in these uniquely American discussions, that outside to sort of kind of balance us out and sort of ground us and like, oh yeah, you know what, when you look at it from the outside, that does seem kind of fucked up.
the American bubble.
Right, and I just want to point out that the NCAA, once again, is a criminal organization that robs kids. I just don't think that being salaried employees is the same thing. But to give you a little anecdotal story about how criminal the NCAA is, so a college kid, I think at a Thunder game, won that half-court jump shot thing for $10,000, and the NCAA, because he was a Division II college basketball player, said that counted as him using his uniquely college athlete skills to win that money, and they were thinking about taking that money away from him or not letting him accept it. Like, the NCAA is horrible, and they're made of bad people.
I just to actually finish all this off, one of the things I'd like people at home to think about, because it comes up so much now, is the idea that I get there's so many problems with unions, and I get that people have these the guy at my work is lazy. If you can explain to me, especially in the American experience, where you're going to get somebody to fight for your video game naming rights, how you're going to get somebody to fight for your health care and all that outside of a union in this day and age, the size and scope of an organization that you would need, I just don't know how it's not union. I understand the arguments for wanting to make unions a lot better, and I get where Jordan's like, I'm from a right-to-work state, blah, blah, blah. It's just that where else are you going to turn to? The corporate, like the level of corporate, not only greed, but size is so far beyond Goliath, I don't know how David catches up without unions.